Had a job offer today, I declined because of their actions. Today I went for an interview at a warehouse. The interview time was 13:30. I arrived 5 minutes early, and had seen 8 other potential candidates that had already been waiting since 1300 for their interview. Then at 1400 about another 7 people arrived. I was eventually interviewed at 14:45, 1 hour and 15 minutes after the agreed time slot. So I entertained the interview and did well. They offered me a position and I respectfully declined, to which they asked me why. I said, if you can't even value a potential candidate's time when they don't work for the company yet, then what will working for you be like? It's disrespectful to have us all waiting that long and shows poor time management skills from yourselves. Then wished them luck with the rest of the applicants and left. Can you imagine if I arrived to an interview late and said, sorry, it's been a crazy morning. Edit. They didn't say anything, they just left us waiting to eventually be called only for a measly, sorry, for the wait in the interview room. Also, I went out after a while for a smoke and a burger from a food truck on the road and went back to wait, so I was relaxed. I only waited to see what they had to say, as a good chat can turn anything around. This wasn't the case, so I declined and left. No protest. Just value of myself and honesty to the interviewer. I didn't accept a job after being interviewed after the person was late and was eating in front of me and speaking at the same time. Food was spat as they spoke and flung onto my hand and my resume. The person began proceeding to brag about how they are secure in their job because their family owns it. Hold your employers to the same standards they expect from you. Once I arrived 15 minutes early to an interview. Took public transit, so you never know if you're going to be 20 minutes early or right on time. I was told to come back at the exact time of the interview. Came back 3 minutes early and was immediately told to leave and come back in 3 minutes. I didn't take that job. I had one similar a few months back. For warehouse manager. Showed up about 10 minutes early. Checked in with reception. And patiently waited for my interview. About 10 minutes after my interview was supposed to have begun, I still hadn't seen or heard anything, so I went and checked with reception again. She asked for who my appointment was with. The production manager. Who she paged for me. Another 20 minutes go by with no word, while the receptionist is watching me fidget in the corner while waiting. And she calls into the manager's office for me, with no answer. Finally she tells me she will go check and see what the hang-up is. Turns out the manager I was supposed to interview with decided to take a 3-day weekend and not tell anyone. He had 2 other interviews scheduled for the day, me being the first, and he never bothered to let any of us know to reschedule. Immediately withdrew my application. Part of me wonders if this is one of those cases where the business thinks they are being clever by making people wait and hiring the one who proves their patience and thirst for the job by waiting the longest. But the companies that do that just end up hiring the people who don't have a car and have to wait for their ride to come back at 5 p.m. This is the right call. They don't value your time on interview. Nothing indicates they'd value it later. I did this once with a sales job, and let me tell you, I felt great listing out the reasons their unprofessionalism cost them my employment. I'm sure it didn't matter to them, but it was one more voice against that abusive behavior. Can you imagine if I arrived to an interview late and said, sorry, it's been a crazy morning? Interestingly, I've found that good organizations will overlook this or even give you the option to reschedule. E.g., I've learned that if someone is having a chaotic morning that makes them run late, they are going to have a bad interview anyway that doesn't represent them. Similarly, a good org should be able to tell you, we are running over an hour behind schedule. Would you like to move your interview back an hour today? Or reschedule for a different date? Quote, of course. The fact that they were interviewing at least 16 people back to back is a red flag anyway. Either they don't know how to filter resumes, they are way behind on hiring, they have massive turnover, or they simply don't care about the time of their applicants or their interviewers. Probably an intentional move on their part. I used to work with a dude who would schedule interviews like this. He said it was a good way to see who would put up with the most BS, and I think he enjoyed the little power trip as well. I told him he'd save himself a lot of time and fix his turnover problem if he worked that hard at reducing the amount of BS instead of increasing it. He got fired eventually cause he couldn't keep a team together long enough to accomplish anything. My last interview I was early and something went down. Medical facility. And the director of nursing was tied up in it. The administrative manager was constantly out there giving my updates, apologizing for the delay, offered a drink and a snack, set me up in a more comfortable area to wait, and gave me the Wi-Fi password so I could goof on my phone without using my data. I was really appreciative, and when it was handled, maybe an hour after my scheduled time, I could see the harassed nature of the Don and asked if she needed a moment, which she gratefully took. The interview went really well and I start next Tuesday. But it was obvious they cared and the delay just could not be avoided. If I had been left to wait with zero information or updates, I probably would have said F it and left. I just went through this myself. This morning, they reached out to me a couple of days ago, offering me a huge salary bump and decent benefits. It wasn't my field, but the overlap was there and I was willing to put in the time, training to get whatever license they needed for me. First red flag. They text me at 9:30 p.m. on Easter Sunday night. We set up an interview time and everything seemed alright, even though the responses seemed a bit suspect and generalized. I show up 10 minutes early and there are already 3 people sitting in the waiting room, filling out paperwork, etc. The manager tells me to hold tight for a few minutes. 0.45 minutes later. Next thing I know, I'm passed off to a subordinate who didn't know why I was there, what I was applying for, etc. What made you want to work here? Quote, you all reached out to me. What job are you applying for? Quote, again, you all reached out to me with a generalized job posting. Customer service sales. I mean, my experience is in writing service. But I also have been selling used cars for about 15 years on my own. So really either will do. He perked up and said, we really need service writers. Quote, I said I'd be willing to work with them, as long as the compensation was comparable. He got a weird look on his face, looked over my resume and make a comment about my name, and instead of getting an actual interview, just told me I'd be contacted if they needed me. It seems, at least, recently, that they don't care. They know there is someone else willing to take a lower pay just to get the job, and they want to find people they can take advantage of. If you seem too smart or too honest, don't expect much. I once showed up for a job interview. After waiting half an hour, I let the receptionist know that if the person interviewing me wanted me to take them seriously, then they should have not expected me to wait indefinitely for them, as they would not tolerate it. From an employee. You did the right thing. Also, I went out after a while for a smoke and a burger from a food truck on the road and went back to wait. So I was relaxed. I only waited to see what they had to say. I lolled at this. Grabbed a burger. Listened to what they had to say. Mesh. Wasn't for me. Honestly. Kudos to you. I have a good story for you. I drove into downtown Seattle and was given directions when I entered the building to use the south elevators. I went to the south elevators and the elevator did not go to the floor I was intended to go to. I looked as fast as I could for another way up to the 20th floor, and when I walked in, the person I was to be interviewed was standing near the elevator and said, "You're late, but I'll only do this interview out of respect for your time." He finally admitted to purposely giving me the wrong directions to see if I was adaptable and could make it on time. Any person who worked for him needs to be early, adaptable, and able to make split-second decisions. I let him know I had to change a tire on the way. Move around my schedule simply to meet the time for the interview should have been proof enough. I drew the line at purposely sabotaging me, and I was out. He shouted as I walked out that another more qualified candidate was on the way up and listed a few of the guy's previous jobs. I got the pleasure of saying, "I'm glad you brought that up. I'm early and that guy being me isn't interested anymore. Have a good day." 2 years ago I had a similar situation, but I was alone in the queue. It was supposed to be second meeting with a boss and some manager. The boss will be late because he has an important meeting that is still going on. "We're very sorry." That manager sounded sincere. Okay, so I waited for over an hour, during which I saw the boss going from room to room, and he even looked at me. I waved to him. No reaction from him. Later I found out that he had a dinner. I think he even gave it away himself. I was the first person they intervened. I received an offer. I accepted it, but on the condition that I will receive an email with the contract for review before starting work. At the last minute, and after asking for it, I got a contract. Totally basic, without supplemented information, e.g. what company it was. So for me it was not a document that I could agree to. And I didn't want to go blind for my first day. Anyway, after 30 minutes of waiting that day, I decided I wasn't going to work for them. And if I had the chance, I'd be mean. The opportunity caught up. They let it happen themselves, and at the last minute, when I was supposed to show up, I wrote an email that I had accepted a job elsewhere because they had not fulfilled our agreement. I wrote a review on the internet too. Jerks. I think they had to pay again for another campaign to find someone else. Honestly, they were totally okay with not employing someone who has self-respect. It's harder to exploit those workers. If I had already decided that I wouldn't take this job, I would have asked what kind of system they had in place for employees who are late. Start with very casual, high-level questions. Then proceed to drill down with more questions, getting to the point of why were they late. Not an interview, but I had the same thing with a colonoscopy. Scheduled at a specific day and time. 10 days of laxatives and a liquid diet making my life miserable. Told them ahead of time that other meds I take make laxatives ineffective. "Oh, we do this all the time." Showed up 15 minutes early as asked. They made me wait 45 minutes past my appointment. So an hour late. "Oh, hey, the laxatives were ineffectual. We can't do the colonoscopy. Do you want to reschedule?" Quote, "Okay, first, I told you guys going in, I'm on other medication that makes laxatives a problem, and you assured me it was fine." Well, we could have given you something stronger if you told us ahead of time. I did tell you ahead of time. It was the first thing I told you. But second, I showed up 15 minutes early as requested, and you still made me wait an hour. So you made me miserable for 10 days and still couldn't meet your appointment time. No, I'm not going to reschedule. I was once berated for being late to an interview that I showed up 15 minutes early for, and then was made to wait 30 minutes for while the clueless, but very nice secretary ran around the warehouse trying to find the hiring manager. Apparently she had no idea there were any interviews that day, which was another red flag. Bad communication between management and the employees can be a huge problem. When she finally managed to find him, she took me to his office and I handed him my resume. Before he had even looked at it, he looked me dead in the eyes and told me that my tardiness would be excused for the interview. But if they chose to hire me, that chronic tardiness would not be tolerated. I tried to respectfully explain that I had actually gotten there a little early and was asked by the secretary to wait in the front office. He told me I should have left the office and went to look for him myself in the warehouse. Right after that comment, I stood up, shook his hand, and told him that I was no longer interested in the position. He said something along the lines of, "It probably wouldn't have worked out anyway." And I just kept my mouth shut and left. By the time I had gotten to the parking lot entrance, the hiring manager was calling my cell. I answered and put the car in reverse, thinking I had dropped something or forgotten something important. Turns out I did forget something: my resume. Apparently, after I walked out, the hiring manager had decided to look over my resume before tossing it. I'd been working in warehouses for around a decade at that point and had a couple of pretty big names on there, including 2 years at an Amazon fulfillment center. He practically begged me to come back in to complete the interview, and even said he'd guarantee that I get the position and offered an extra $2 an hour over the advertised wage when I told him, once again, that I was no longer interested. After that, I just ended the call and left. I love your attitude. A good chat can turn anything around. That is so true. If my boss is 45 minutes late, it's, "Whoops." If I'm 45 minutes late, is, "We need to talk about your performance."
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.